sa, si, sa. Sa, si, sa.
Hi, welcome. I'm gonna start with a little ritual and then we move on to you. Hi, welcome. So as yesterday, for who was here, I'm gonna read something for you all, and after we are gonna experience the peel. So please don't open it till I say so. And yeah, it's a small ritual to welcome everyone, and then we can move on to the talk. I call potentia gaudendi, or orgasmic force, the real or virtual strength of a body's total excitation. This strength is of indeterminate capacity. It has no gender. It is neither male nor female, neither human nor animal, neither animated nor inanimated. Its orientation emphasizes neither the feminine nor the masculine, and creates no boundary between heterosexuality and homosexuality, or between object and subject. Neither does it know the difference between being excited, being exciting, or being excited with. It favors no organ over any other, so that the penis possesses no more orgasmic force than the vagina, the eye, or the toe. This new condition of the body blurs the traditional modern distinction between art, performance, Okay, fine. I had it also on my phone. Much better. Yeah, this new condition of the body blurs the traditional modern distinction between art, performance, media, design, and architecture. The new pharmacological and surgical techniques set in motion tectonic construction processes that combine figurative representation, according to which the organs, the vessels, the fluids, techno-blood, techno-sperm, etc., and the molecules are converted into the prime material from which our corporality is manufactured. Techno-bodies are either not yet alive or already dead. We are half fetuses, half zombies. Thus, every politics of resistance is a monster politics. Okay, now open the bag, take the peel out. Okay, you're gonna open it, be careful, open the upper part, because you might lose the inside. Now, I must inform you that this thing is made of sugar, lactose, so not very vegan friendly, and that's it basically. And I ask you, you can say no, so I'm pretty sure you're not gonna die from this, I swear. But you should put it on your tongue, crack it with your teeth, and then with the saliva, just keep it in your mouth and feel it. It's very simple. Okay, someone feels something. Well, thank you.
Stay with. Good evening, buonasera, guten Abend. I'm very pleased to welcome you in the second day of opening the PIL, the Performative Symposium. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest, João Florêncio, Cheang, and Maggic. Thank you so much for coming and to be here tonight. Today is, as I said, the second day of this performative symposium. We started with an amazing workshop and talk by Pattern House. I would like also to thank Pattern House to be part of our dialogue and all the participants. So tonight, this talk is part of, it's interesting for us, connection with Kingdom of the Hill, the exhibition we are hosting now in Museum. And tomorrow there will be other important moments, and we would like to invite to come also tomorrow and stay with us also tomorrow. I will also welcome and thank again Stefano Musilli, he's here tonight, part of the Cultural Institute of Kingdom of Netherlands in Italy, and thank you for the supporting us and supporting these events, and thank you to your support. We are able to host fantastic artists for Netherlands also. So I also would like to welcome the public is following us online, so welcome digitally to this platform. And and before to give the mic Flavio, I would like also thank again my colleagues and all the museum staff and our members, Flavio, Michael, Giulia, and Brita, that together with me, we organized this performative symposium, and we are preparing other events for next year, so stay tuned.
Eccoci. Frida vi ha già detto praticamente quasi tutto quello che dovevate sapere prima di cominciare. Frida has already said almost everything you need to know before starting the talk. The talk is entitled Queer Technologies, Biopolitics, Emancipation and World Building. E il talk che sta per iniziare si intitola Queer Technologies, Biopolitics, Emancipation and World Building, e vedrà il ricercatore dell'Università di Exeter, João Florêncio, in dialogo con le artiste Cheang e Maggic, che sono parte di Kingdom of the Hill con le loro opere. The talk will see the researcher of the Exeter University, João Florêncio, speaking and talking with the artists Cheang and Maggic, which are here in Kingdom of the Hill with them works. Spero che possiate godere di questo momento, che è quello che chiude la seconda giornata di Opening the Pill. Grazie e buona serata.
Oh, yes. Well, okay. Yeah. So, we're going to be in conversation informally, but I think in order to introduce the topic and kind of kickstart the conversation, I would like to maybe read 2 vignettes from a paper that I wrote a while back, but that I think will kind of introduce some of the ideas that the exhibition, but also Shuli's and Mary Maggic's work, I think can speak to. So this is very short. It was March in Berlin, and it was a Sunday morning. Having had breakfast with my lover, we headed to one of the German capital's many gay club nights, famous for being all weekend non-stop events where dancing and public sex are welcomed under the same roof. A couple of hours after we arrived, caught up with friends and danced, we decided to check out what was going on in the club's dark room. Inside, several men were having sex with one another, most if not all of them without condoms. As we stayed there, engaging in different ways and to different degrees with the men in the room, I registered the occasional friendly chatter, the exchange of partners, and the extremely guttural nature of the sexual noises those men were making. Some of them, whom I had seen outside earlier, sounded like they had dropped their voices by an octave upon entering the room, their body language having also stiffened to a very different posture and choreography to the ones they had maintained while dancing outside. In the dark room, shoulders were kept fixed and hips were only allowed very precise thrusting movements. As we eventually moved out to the garden to smoke a cigarette, the occasional half-naked man would come out of the building with his fast-moving eyes, intense sexual demeanor, and noticeable erection, denouncing the levels of GHB, Viagra, and likely other substances they had been taken. I could hear some of those men talking about having been out all weekend and about the sex they had had in the darkroom in a manner that hovered between braggadocio and sudden realization that it was now Sunday and they were still out. Inside, as the sound of techno, house, and disco continued to mold the time of ecstasy, a group of volunteers from a sexual health NGO gave information to punters on risk management of sex and drugs, STIs, and on pre-exposure prophylaxis, and treatment as prevention, antiretroviral cocktail regimes to tackle potential or actual HIV infection. So this is vignette 1, this is vignette 2. It was April in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, also a Sunday morning. Having used the gay hookup app to meet a guy for a sex date, I got ready and waited by the front window looking at the street below for him to arrive. As he eventually entered my field of vision, the familiar sight of his rather large and full backpack hinted at the likely rhythm of the weekend he had been going through. Having opened him the door, we started chatting as we moved to the bedroom. He seemed like a friendly and relaxed guy, also a very attractive one. As we got to the bedroom, he promptly opened his bag to pick up a cock ring and a bottle of poppers. Glancing into the backpack, I could see drugs paraphernalia recognizable by many 21st century gay men, a bag of cotton buds, various injection kits, including needles and syringes, cleaning wipes, hand sanitizer, a bottle of pharmaceutical alcohol, changes of clothes, a bottle of Truvada, and 2 or 3 small boxes, the contents of which I couldn't see but guessed to be recreational drugs. He, my sex date, asked me whether I partied, an expression that is used among gay men as shorthand for party and play, or PNP, the consumption of recreational drugs during sexual encounters, what in the UK we also call chemsex. It turns out he had spent the previous few days slamming, that is, injecting crystal methamphetamine while having sex with various other men in their homes. I politely declined his offer, something that he was totally fine with, and we had sex for about an hour or so while playing porn on my computer. Once we finished, he thanked me for having allowed him to come, as otherwise he would have to go to another guy's place. It was already late morning on a Sunday, and he should be going home, as he had been out for a couple of days. He grabbed various toiletry products he was carrying in his bag: hand sanitizer, toothpaste, toothbrush, mouthwash, shower gel, and asked me to use the bathroom. As I was waiting in the adjacent bedroom, I suddenly heard him shout, "Oh, fuck." Asked what had happened, he replied, "I've just realized I've missed my flight to New York to attend my best friend's wedding this afternoon." So those were 2 little stories that happened when I was doing field work in Berlin and LA, research, but I think they kind of speak to some of the ideas that I think connect the work that the 3 of us do to do with the ways in which drugs or medicine, whatever you want to call them, prescription drugs or recreational drugs, the ways in which, like other biomedical technologies, like other technologies, they play some kind of infrastructural role, not only in 21st century forms of embodiment of how we relate to ourselves, to our bodies, but also to kind of 21st century architectures of sexuality, and how those all impact the ways in which we experience time, we experience our one another, and possible ways of socializing and possible new forms of relating to other people. So I think this is really at the core of the words how the word pharmakon has been written about in philosophy. So pharmakon being the Greek word that means at the same time the poison and the medicine, and the ways in which perhaps, so this is maybe what I want to kind of start talking about today, is the ways in which maybe there's something particularly queer about inhabiting this space that is both a space of toxicity or a space of poison, but also a space of medicine, of healing, and of exploring new forms of world making and world building. So I would like use this prompt to bring you in and start talking to you. Do these ideas kind of resonate with things that you've been thinking about?
Was that a question?
Yes, yes, Julie. Yes, it was.
Could you please rephrase it?
Of course.
I'm
So
just like still thinking about the
processing.
sex in the dark room. I'm sorry. I couldn't turn around fast enough for this question. How did you switch from that?
sex in the dark room. How do you switch from it?
Yeah, to switch
Maybe
from...
we're still in the dark room.
Yes.
And
That's good. Immersive, yes.
we are in this immersive dark room.
Yes.
And there are people
I
having.
like your kind of field study, by the way. I wish I could do this kind of field study. You get paid to do that?
You're in the wrong job. So we are still in the dark room.
Yes.
There's people having sex, and there's all kinds of chemical prostheses
Yes.
circulating. There's recreational drugs. There's drugs to prevent HIV infection. There's all kinds of things going, and these things act on us in different ways. They have the potential to change our bodies in many different ways. So the question is, how do these ideas, do you relate to these ideas, to these concerns about the biotechnology and the ways in which it kind of impacts our body?
Well, I can answer.
You can go on.
Well, I think that all of these technologies, like we can't just blindly accept them as, like a techno solution or as some kind of liberation. I mean, I'm just thinking about the example of the birth control pill.
No.
And how it was a symbol of female sexual liberation and kind of this freedom from the domestic sphere. But then later on, later feminist movements realized that the pill is actually killing women with all of the side effects and the mood disorders and everything. So I think to blindly accept, what the pharmaceutical industry is giving to us, or corporate marketing, or whatever, these lifestyle drugs that they're promoting, I think can be really dangerous, if we just kind of stay as consumers.
And we stay as the consumed too, in some way, right? In the sense that there's a particular kind of way of maybe capitalization, or of mining kind of the potential of bodies.
Right, because, if you think about all the research and clinical trials that goes into the making of these pills, or let's call them biotechnologies, these are people's bodies, going into these trials, and bodies being commodified for this type of research. I'm just thinking about the trials done to women in Puerto Rico when they were trying to make a sellable version of the pill, and of course it was white women who benefited from the birth control pill.
That reminds me also of the ways in which, so for instance, how the introduction of antiretrovirals allowed for some of these scenes that I described to thrive and to really explore new sexual cultures to develop, new ways of relating to sex and subjectivity to develop, but that is also there's a degree of access, there's a story of access, who has access to these drugs and who can benefit from them, versus people who need them and cannot access them. So how already that market of the marketing of these technologies and the circuits of consumption and the ways in which it is consumed and made sense of varies so drastically depending on different populations. The famous story in the UK would be, how the majority of gay men who are accessing PrEP and for kind of prophylaxis of HIV are mostly white gay men, and there's such a minority of men of color who are making use of that. So the drugs are not even speaking to them, or the marketing is not even speaking to them, or the language of sexual health and public health is not speaking to them. So there's really an interesting question there too, right? Shirley?
Oh, yes. I'm in the business of making pills, so I should be speaking from the corporate point of view. I am in the process of producing red pill, actually. The red pill issued by the Genom Corporation, which is a biotechnology company in association with pharmaceutical industry. Producing red pill, collecting from human orgasm data. And so the red pill is produced and filled with a lot of DNA encoded orgasm data, encoded blood cell to create these giant red pills. And the slogan would be, your pleasure, our business. And so we are talking about, I think you're talking about prescription or recreational. And this is a very, it's actually a very interesting binary thing you're making. It's at the same time, is recreational or prescription drugs definitely opposite each other? I don't think so, right? Yeah. So, people get high from prescription drugs all the time, right? But also speaking of, particularly with AIDS and HIV, of course the whole ACT UP activism from the 1980s, the whole central issue is about the government, the FDA in America, particularly not releasing the drugs, not releasing the drug to cure HIV. So in other countries, there is no such protocol, mainly because the USA, I think it's working hand in hand with the pharmaceuticals. So there is a lot of different rules about releasing the drug. So the whole if we look at the ACT UP at the time, the slogan is release the drug, release the drug. For me, I am particularly dealing with the issues or the drugs in every aspect, because I think it's totally a corporate control situation. It's a totally pharmaceutical conspiracy kind of thing. I think even we can push forward to the vaccination we are accepting. I am someone who trusts science. I would take any vaccination. But again, this is, if we talk about the politics of vaccination, which we are experiencing or currently experiencing or experiencing for the last year, you see the whole development of vaccination, the kind of different elements that put into making the vaccination, right? So we talk about from making from the virus to more synthesis material. So a lot of these technopolitics is, of course, is the theme of my work. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea of that you're talking about, the idea of corporate control, and which makes me think about obviously the systems of distribution and the systems of access, not just to these technologies, to these pills, but also to the knowledge that is required not only to produce them, but to access them and to consume them. So, and how maybe that idea of control is also extends to that. So it's also kind of an epistemological form of control, or you know, of knowledge that is not shared, that is not, say, you know, part of a commons, if you want. And to me, that's really at the core of then how these pills, how these drugs come to be consumed, and the ways in which we engage with them, which I'm looking at you in terms of the idea of then biohacking, and this idea of taking on something, both knowledge and products that exist in a particular institutionalized system, and resignifying them, reusing them in different ways, and taking control over it.
Right, like I definitely see, you know, any technology that's produced and sent out into the real world is just going to reflect the pre-existing lines of inequality and unequal distribution and who gets to have access, right? And I just think about the example of ACT UP and how this is such a great example of biohacking, or the potential of what biohacking could be in terms of demystifying the tools, the knowledges, the resources for something as, you know, like if you think about a pill, that's like the ultimate black box, right? Like how do you even begin to deconstruct or open the black box like the pill, right? But then, you know, when you have lives at stake, then what can you do except to, you know, really try to absorb that knowledge and demystify it in the public sphere? I mean, I consider myself a child of critical art ensemble and Sub Rosa, you know, and this whole idea of public amateurism, you know, it's like an inherently political act, you know. So, of course, biohacking has to do a lot with play and experimentation and tinkering and this kind of repurposing of the material. But I really see it as a political and also a socio-material practice of excavation, really. Yeah, opening the black box.
Opening the black
Opening the pill.
The pill is black box, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think that also what you're talking about also resonates with. There's this fantastic colleague in Sydney who has worked for a long time in kind of critical drug studies, but also around kind of queer histories of drugs and of drug use. And one expression that he uses all the time is this, he calls it like disco pharmacology, which I think speaks to what you're talking about. So the kinds of subcultural knowledges about, you know, drug use, about patterns of drug use, about things that you know, should be comfortable doing, things you need to think about, you know, don't mix this with that, or what happens when someone goes into a particular kind of state, how can you help them? And this is knowledge that, in many ways, that was one of the things that he argues, so his name is Cain Race, and one of the things that he argues is that many of the knowledges that were in these communities of practice and these communities of use were eventually became established institutionalized knowledge about how drugs interact with one another. So there's also that level of extraction of community knowledges, and then how that knowledge transfers to institutions or is extracted by and commodified by institutions, co-opted by institutions. Yeah.
Okay, but speaking of co-opted by institution, I do have a question for Mary also, but I think maybe we should also kind of put it in the context about the recent years, sort of the rise, I would say, almost like a rise of the generation of biohacking, kind of DIY bio-artists, you call it, you know, so initiate the research or the project about trying to work with mushroom for the gender changing, you know, so it's more about also kind of refuse the whole bioengineering process and going back to the natural way of maybe able to abstract substance from the mushroom to actually create help the whole gender changes. So this is a project by Adrian North and Taro. So it's in the process, and there's still quite a process of research to do. I do want to mention particularly, I do not feel at the same time you have a kind of this whole rise of, which I feel I'm part of. I think in 2009, I declare myself, the cycle of my work since 2009 has been called Vital Love Biohack, right? So this is like a whole cycle of what I'm engaged in. And so at the same time, you have this whole generation of bioartists taking body as experiment. At the same time, if you think about the whole institution of the medical institution or industry, the development model there, which is sort of thinking, in a certain way, it's kind of behind the door, isn't it? So, if I did a bit of research in this huge bioengineering company in Barcelona, PRBB, for example. So you see the kind of technology, the lab experiment, the cell experiment is so advanced, the whole development of synthesis technology, right? So for me, I feel like I have to, in my work, I try to confront, I become very much more about confronting this hidden agenda that's set up by the bioengineering company. And so I just was curious that for you, do you feel, how do you see this kind of parallel development that one is really highly technical and highly behind the door, like all these different cells being developing in the freezer, right? And you being sort of holding the Holman workshop, so like, give me some more peas, pee more, like that kind of thing. How you treat this?
I mean, I think it's really interesting to compare these two different practices, because what I think of is, what is regarded as valid knowledge, valid science, legitimate science. Because, the public wants to believe that, what happens behind the laboratory doors is like the objective science, or like the type of science that has like authoritative truth, right? That's what we're all kind of, brought up to believe. But, in my practice, doing biohacking workshops and working with, lay persons who are not specialized and not trained, and we're all hacking together and producing this experiential knowledge. When you talk about, experimenting on your own body, who's to say that that's not a valid truth, like that's not a valid experience. So, so like when we're hacking together, it's almost like a form of world making. Like we're actually worlding together, because we're choosing to discard what was fed to us as like the authoritative truth about our bodies, and we're choosing to create our own fictions and our own truths about our bodies. So,
and their own myths.
Right, right. And that's why I really love how Preciado frames it as, these somatic fictions. Because once you label it as a fiction, then, it begs the question of, well, why can't we create fictions of our own?
Yeah, that's something I always tell, my undergraduate students, because they always have this, when they're trying to like start getting their hand on, or their head around, what makes an academic, or what makes knowledge academic, and not just their opinion. And we often end up the conversation being about, it's just the boxes that you have to tick in order for the same thing that you are saying to qualify as academic.
Or to publish in
Yeah,
a journal.
so it's about style, it's about presentation, it's about certain rules. So you can say the same thing having a drink at a bar, but so actually the difference between the two things is the question of gatekeeping, right? It's a question of different industries, be it academia or be it bio like pharma industry, about what systems need to be put in place so that we become the kind of the primary site where this particular kind of knowledge is produced. Because it's our business. Your knowledge, or our knowledge is our business. The moment you share it, we run out of business, right? So there's something there too with the pleasure in the knowledge being businesses that different institutions have to kind of keep to themselves because that's how they survived for centuries, right? So there's that kind of interesting thing that maybe ultimately what happens behind closed doors at the lab is literally just like a bunch of people peeing in a pot, and like what you're doing with your workshops, but the architecture of how that knowledge is then communicated, and it is the architecture, it is the institution that legitimizes it, right? So that brings all the kind of questions of power that we're all talking about all the time, right? So that maybe what is being produced. So maybe the issue is not what is being made, it's not the technologies, it's not, like you said, the drug that in a context is seen as recreational or illegal in another context, institutional context is seen as a medicine, but it is the same thing. So what sustains all these relationships, or the problems that they may trigger, it's not the things in themselves, it's not the pills, it's the ecologies of their consumption.
The context.
Yeah, the context of their consumption.
Yeah, I mean, I had friends who were using old birth control pills, like recycled birth control pills for their own gender transition, because the main ingredients are just estrogen and progesterone. Right, so you're repurposing that drug for a different use.
Earlier I was thinking about that same example, and this kind of community networks of like bias clubs as well, and what can you source, which in the history in trans histories has been fundamental to early transitions. How can you get somewhere and find a way of getting this thing that we know through our amateur knowledge that will have this desired effect, not the effect for which it was produced, but we know that it also works in this other way, like antiretroviral drugs, which is more what I work on, but were made as a way of self-management of health, and so also disciplining, but also of surveillance, because then you have to go to the clinic every 3 months to do all these bloods and keep on these basically transforming yourself into data sets. But then scandal, gay men realize that if you take this drug, then you can do all these other things without the consequence, without the payback, as it were. So and then scandal, it's out of control, but that potential was already there in the drug itself, right? And that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Tell us about your red pill. What do you think the red pill?
About it?
Is genome? Are they just the evil, or does the red pill have a potential to enter into kind of black markets, underground networks of consumption that makes the red pill suddenly?
I think the concept of red pill is actually maybe subverting the red pill and blue pill in the matrix.
Yes.
And
That's
so if we start talking about the particularly queer technology or for me, it's about subverting. So basically, we are borrowing or appropriate a lot of different technology or a lot of different set thing, and then we subverting it. So the red pill become a totally reinvented pills, and of course, it is. Actually, maybe since you keep talking about fucking, so I can talk about, I can definitely talk about orgasm.
We were made for each other.
Thank you. I once, I could give a talk and just mention orgasm 20 times without blushing. My work is a lot about orgasm data. So for me, maybe we could switch to the idea of data a bit. I actually have been engaged in collecting orgasm data for some time. A lot of my work, either the corporation, the Genome Corporation, Genom, G-E-N-O-M, without E, corporation, when they collect orgasm data, is for kind of instant consumption. So it could be the orgasm on the go. It could be a chip that kind of sort of plug into your phone. Or the current movie I'm making, the collecting an orgasm data at the end would be to make this red pill, again, is about consumption of orgasm. But then to consider our body is, in a certain way, for me, is obsolete, or is an occupied zone. Basically, I don't feel I own my body anymore. I think we have departed from the whole cyborg theory, and we have gotten into more of a transgenic discourse in a way. I think every time we're talking about drug or any kind of experiment, we are turning ourselves more and more toward taking our body as the final experimental one. So speaking of these, about the data, we are now also, we talk about data being appropriate by the big corporation, about Facebook, about any social media. We volunteer our data to the corporation. And so same thing, why I consider the orgasm is just orgasm is the data. Orgasm is the data that can be collected, can be recycled, and can be traded. Yeah. So in this way, I do feel it also kind of reflects upon the current the field of bioengineering. If you talk about the development of the cell, the synthetic technology, the microbe, all these is taking, it's sort of splitting our body apart, isn't it? So it's more about like, if you get sick, we don't really try to cure you anymore. We just replace you. So, we just replace a cell. So all these cells being developed is like, implement into your body. So it's at the end, so you probably have a heart of the cow and have the ear of the mouse. And, these are in terms of the artists who have been working on this, we talk about like, Stella, creating the ears in the hand, so this kind of artist experiment on own body at the same time, the big company, the corporation actually is exactly, also doing this, but however, that technology is invisible, isn't it? We are not, so, so what would it mean to expose ourselves to all these technology? What would it mean, So, yeah.
I think something that you say that it's really, I think, speaks to maybe like a shift in historical shift in our understanding of ourselves from a kind of a modern idea or ideal of like wholeness and oneness. I've I'm an unbroken, complete individual, to this, to what you said, that we are no longer one, we are just industry take from us, like blood results, X-rays, whatever it is, BMI, whatever data, pulse. But we know many of us wear tech on our wrists that is telling you all the time, who are you today? 1,000 steps, that many calories, heart rate, and so we're in a moment where technology is completely breaking us into all these manageable data sets. So it's the kind of...
Oh, here's the intervention. It's okay.
And so...
I should break my thoughts. Oh, I was going to say.
To be real. To be real, you've got to be real.
So to be real today, what...
I'm real. That girl Jennifer, she's so real. She's so real. She's so real. That girl Jennifer, she's so real. She's so real. She's so real. She's so real. She's even real on several songs that claim to be the same song. Even if the song sounds nothing alike. But who says sameness is real? 'Cause I'm real. 'Cause I'm real. I feel. 'Cause I feel real. I feel real. I feel real. 'Cause I'm real. Trying to be better than the original I'm real. 'Cause I'm real. I'm real like Jennifer. My first version is now mixed with much like the ones. I'm real. The way I talk. The way I walk. The way you move. The way you look. 'Cause I'm real. The way you look. The way I walk, the way you talk, the way you stare, my style, my hair, I'm real. I'm real like Jennifer. I'm a real Jennifer. I'm a real lady. The way I talk, I'm real lady. I'm remade. Topping charts. Featuring me in a newer, You make me feel mighty real. I feel real, 'cause I'm real. 'Cause I'm pretending to be that boy. Pretending to be real. Pretending to be real. Or real enough. Or real enough. Or actually really far away from, really long time ago. 'Cause I'm pretending, 'cause I'm really far away from a really long time ago. That girl stopped being a girl, so they could sometimes be Britney, but also Rapunzel, but also not. But also a cowboy. But also a cowboy. Leather boots, thigh high, legs widespread. Spreading my legs so I can absorb them. 'Cause I'm real, I feel. 'Cause I'm real, I feel real. I feel real. 'Cause I'm real. 'Cause I'm real. 'Cause I feel real. 'Cause I'm real. I feel. 'Cause I'm spreading my legs so I can absorb you. Sometimes I wish I could crash with you. Like crash into you, like a car crash. Sometimes I wish I could crash into the television. Splinter the barriers between us. Bloody morphing, bloody melting. I feel it. I feel real. Are you really? And only you can name me. Are you really?
Do you have
Sometimes,
a web browser? Can I Google something?
sometimes I wish I could crash into the television, splinter the barriers between us. Sometimes I wish that real screens could melt together. I'm trying to put on my best smile. You're wearing my face. I'm putting on a smoother filter. I'm putting on that mask. 'Cause I'm real. I'm putting on a mask. 'Cause I'm real. Not that there's anything else underneath anyway. Are you really? really, I'm really, I'm really, really real. I'm really, really, I'm really, really, I'm really, really real. 'Cause I'm really, really real. I'm real, I'm real. 'Cause I'm really, really, 'cause I'm real. 'Cause I'm real. 'Cause I'm real, I'm really, really. 'Cause I'm really, are you really? 'Cause I'm really, really real. I'm real. You made me. You made me. My real life. You made me. You made me. You made me. You made me.
It's okay.
And you know what's the skill? Is how to plug this into the conversation. So the idea of, we're being broken into data and data sets, and so the question of real becomes, it's not just a question of, it's the data that makes us real. When we walk with the smartwatch, or when the doctor shows us all these different graphs of like levels of things in our blood, or whatever it is, or it's too much sugar, or it's too low testosterone, or it's too high testosterone, or it's whatever hormone it is, or whatever. It is that data that gives us a sense of being alive and of being real, right? The data and so that's the transition from the moment where we were just, where we thought of ourselves just as whatever, this kind of body, to now the more knowledge, the more data the more access to the more data we have about ourselves, the more we are, in a sense.
Actually, the current most popular or most being used a lot, the software that's being used for creating virtual reality work is called Unreal, yeah? And so this just kind of brings us to the context of the real and the reality and Unreal. I thought it's of course, throughout the time, we have been using different terms to describe the experience of real, unreal, simulated. I think I don't think people use simulation anymore, right? It's just such an old term that you should not use in this term anymore. So what's the new words? It's interesting that throughout creating the virtual reality, or the way that we are living our reality per se, that we are also recycle different terminology, which also become a certain application of the situation we're in. I forgot your question, I'm sorry.
No, it was just about data. Data makes you real.
Data makes you real.
Yeah.
Which data? I'm dealing with a lot of data.
So, I mean, maybe I'm just talking about myself, but when I go to the doctor and the doctor shows me numbers, it's reassuring. I'm like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's what it is, and I can quantify it, and it's about this number.
I have to disagree. I actually think I see data as it's like an attempt to measure something that's immeasurable.
No, but exactly. But that's the thing, right? It's that on the one hand, that is the fiction that you were talking about fictions at the start. Like the fiction is that there was one moment in time where it was, if only you can look deeper, if only you get the microscope, the X-ray, or whatever new kind of imaging technology, like if you can just look really deep, you'll find it, the truth, right? And now it's not about looking deep. Now it's about like mine it for the data. Now it is the data that tells you So that's moved from, like kind of, I guess, like ocular centrism, and like vision to data, to number. And I think that's like fundamental to the moment that we live today, no? And in how those fictions are created.
But I think still a lot of data is based on ocular centrism.
Yeah, sure.
But no, I think that, it always perplexes me, the categories and the taxonomies that we've created for things that are in constant perpetual motion, or like things that are constantly changing. Like this, when you open your biology textbook, you see like the anatomy of a female body and the anatomy of a male body, and you think like, oh, bodies should only exist in these two categories, but it's like, there's so much more than that, right? So it's like this human attempt to understand nature, to have a grasp of what nature is, but then at the same time, in that quest to understand, you're actually just creating a construct, So it's like, that's why I don't believe that objectivity ever existed in the first place. It's only like the desire for objectivity exists, but real objectivity doesn't exist. So,
but then there's the kind of the double edge of this situation of like the data, right? Because because it is also the data in the data world that then now allows us, but that now sustains even so much discourse around gender. Because then we're thinking, actually it's not just how you see it, because if you get all these figures, all these numbers, all this other stuff that we now understand better, now you see that it's more complicated, and that is actually not just about the vision of the body, it's about other stuff that is happening. And so we have this double edge of the data world and of surveillance, because that data cannot be gathered without surveillance, right? Without mining our bodies for more, ones and zeros and whatever. But then it also allows for those moments of like relief and possibility, realizing actually I was right all along, or I was correct all along. So I was not, I was not a glitch, or I was not an error, because it's everywhere. So it stands, it's like it's the curse and the blessing. It's medicine and the poison.
but I feel like maybe the blessing comes from the fact that there are categories of normativity defined, and so the blessing maybe is that you fit into that normativity, which a lot of us do, but then there's also a lot of bodies that don't fit into those categories. So are they wrong? Like, is their existence wrong? So, but that's what science like maybe wants to tell us.
Yeah, but maybe it's also like what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about these knowledges that already existed and then eventually only become knowledge when they're institutionalized. Like these experiences of gender already always existed, but now there's like someone in a lab saying, oh no, but look, it's true, because we now have data.
But I think if we start talking about data, then we talk about algorithm. And within the algorithm, of course, then that's where all the various change, all the variation, the valiant variation can happen. Let's talk about the algorithm of gender and sexuality in the digital age with the surveillance system. Again, data is also connected with the whole surveillance apparatus, because it's totally can be reused. It's totally the most variable, immaterial. However, it's real. Yeah, you can say it's totally numbers immaterial. At the same time, it is the assets. It's the only assets that exist for us. If you consider body is obsolete, then you would say your body is actually just composed of numbers or the data, right? So then it became what would that formation of this body make out the data can be then surveyed and can be calculated. And by calculation, then you have glitch. Then by glitch, then you have conspiracy.
Okay.
Yeah, question.
Yes, we were going to open anyway. Thanks, Liz.
Yes.
Yeah, why not? Yes.
So all of this discussion about
What?
all of this discussion about data and sort of like body hacking, and also, I mean, in my mind right now, what I'm wondering about is, and also like categorization, and like essentially every body that is, you know, somehow like existing under some kind of like medical, like every medicalized body is in a system, right? Like even if you are like hacking your own hormones, or you know, gaining medication in other ways other than like through your doctor, through a system, like we're still all like subjects of a larger economy of like biopolitical control. So what I want to know is, and I think where does economy come into this discussion that you're all talking about in relationship to hacking? Because the other part of the discussion of this, I feel, is that all of these systems depend on like renegade hackers. They depend on us. They depend on artists. They depend on visionaries in order to, they also depend on bodies that don't you know, fit into categories, because those bodies are categorized in order to be monetized upon, right? So how do you break the system of monetization? How do you break the system of even like the most radicalized bodies becoming, in many cases, the bodies that are like the biggest cash cows for, you know, institutions, for big pharma, for all of it? And then often, the other side of it is, you know, particularly for like chronically ill folks, people who are trans, people who are, you know, like maybe who are not fitting into specific categorizations, but like depend on systems of medical control to, you know, survive. This kind of notion of like, the less you know, the better for many people. Like, I don't want to go to the doctor, because when I go to the doctor, then it starts like an entire sort of steamrolling of, well, you should try this drug, or you should try that drug, or maybe you should think about this or that. And to advocate for yourself in that situation is also such, you know, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. It's really hard to say, no, I don't feel I need that. No, I think I can find alternative routes to that, because essentially, at the end of the day, it's not about care, it's about money, right? So I'm just curious, like in all of your work, how are you also thinking about like, we are still subjects of, we're like bodies that are making money for things that are much larger than us, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, my latest solution is...
I thought you'd have a solution, Shuli.
I arranged myself. My latest solution is to become virus. Virus becoming is, for me, is the only way out of the system.
Is to become a virus.
Yes. So I think the fear, we have been living in the fear of the virus. We have always been. The virus is such a, you know, particularly we all globally experience the pandemic, you know, which I think still exists. But yeah, my new slogan, you know, I love to come up with slogans. You know, so my new slogan would be virus becoming. For me to embed the virus into your own body is that we can all become a collective open source body. And that's the only way we can enter into a brand new ecosystem.
I just want to build on top of that. When you say becoming virus, what comes to my mind is becoming the other, because I think that's what the fear is based in, is not really understanding what the other is or being afraid of the other. becoming afraid of the alien. That's what the whole disaster capitalism was, really driving upwards, with the whole COVID pandemic. Like we need to double up on hand sanitizers, face masks, vaccines. It was like driving up the fear of the other, fear of getting infected. Maybe to answer your question, Liz, like maybe the first part of your question, maybe it's really dissolving those definitions of what separates us from what is the other, right? Like, because deprogramming or, right, because I feel that the other, like defining the other is the same process of defining what is pathological, right? Like what has to be cured, like what is the outlier that has to be erased or fixed, right? So maybe it's those definitions that have to be dissolved.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm like a cynic Marxist or something like that, in the sense that you cannot get out of it. Right, and the idea of the virus is interesting because, because it was also those very same systems that allows us to become the bodies that we are today, right? Even if you think about, it's those economies that gave us tools that we then used for other things. But also the idea of economy is just an idea of, like, how do you manage your home, right? So there's that kind of broader sense of economy as what is the word? Not house management. Yeah, house economy, house management. That's more or less what the word means. So the question can be not how you get out of it, but what different ways do we have to manage our bodies as homes, but also the homes that we inhabit temporarily, at all kinds of scale. And the idea of the virus is really, we're kind of all coming together with the idea of the virus. The virus is good. The virus is good, Julie. It's really not. Don't escape it. Become it, or places you in this kind of ethical position of you are also it. So what choices are you making will you make, right? I mean, we are here in this building today because of economy and because of money, and there's artwork everywhere, but who are you going to be in that moment? When you take like kind of responsibility over your position and the space that you occupy and it's the question of ethics, and everyone is scared of ethics because it's about responsibility. What decision are you making at every moment? And that's what the virus does, I think. It's like you go in and you do your thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's like somehow we are afraid of the virus integrating. Sorry, we're afraid of the virus integrating into our genome, right? Or getting infected, right? We're afraid of that integration, something foreign and something alien going inside of our bodies. And a lot of that comes from, like the purity politics, right? Like that's what the whole like medical industrial complex is based on, right? That's what the whole the binary categories that we have, not just like male and female, but also like good versus evil, nature versus culture, human versus animal, right? It's all like, let's create these divisions, let's maintain the divisions and maintain the purity of those divisions, right? And so that's why, Shuli, when you say becoming virus as a strategy, like that makes a lot of sense to me, like integrating, the other.
Yeah.
It was said that, which I have never really confirmed this, that, not again. When Bentham designed the Pentagon, panopticon structure, there was actually a little passageway, a crack or a little passageway become a place that prisoners supposed to be able to go and to do what?
Fuck.
No, masturbation.
Oh, masturbation. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, so
Come
no,
on.
different thing. So we need private moment. We're not talking about social environment. I'm always very interested now to think about these little passageway that how we can get away, how we can is a kind of a crack that could open up for us. And maybe when I talk about virus becoming, maybe it is about also seeking that particular passageway, that little passageway maybe with a bit of light can shine through, and is there that we can elevate ourselves, in terms of humanity, in terms of, what do you call that? Techno-humanities, yes. So it's come back to that. Oh, shit. I should become your speaker, a spokesperson, techno-humanities, yes. I actually do like these terms. I think, whenever we talk about technology and we talk about humanities, it's true. I think we come back to, all this biohacking, and even when I speaking about virus becoming, to embrace the virus as part of our body. But indeed, we are. We are already virus. You all have viral bodies. You all get vaccination, with different degree of viral experiment already sink into your body. So to accept that and we all become more equal in that sense.
Like Laurie Anderson said, language is a virus, and it was the first virus and the first technology, right? That kind of infected us. So it's inseparable. It's impossible to separate the humanities from the techno and the humanities from the virus, because language was the first virus in some way, right?
Yeah.
We're on time. Does anyone have any comments or questions or just?
Yeah, we can take 2 questions. Yeah? 2.
But we also don't have to.
Why
not? Oh. It's like those seminars where you kind of ask students, okay, can you talk? And they're like, I'm just typing. I'm just like taking notes, or I'm not listening. It's so good. They're not too big questions.
Well, it's
there is
you want to say something?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Well, we knew something was going to happen. We did not know when or what.
It's a stage intervention, huh? It's a stage intervention. We would not call that a performance.
Yes, and I also didn't know how long it would last, so I thought it was just a little at the beginning, and then I tried to start talking, but that was just a pause, so I just let it all go, because we didn't know what it was. Yeah. Yes, it's good. It's good to have a break from just 3 people talking about all kinds of random things, right? And but I think it fit very well, I think. In my view, I was like, I was taking notes and everything, so I appreciate it.
How in Charlie's performance, they were actually like deconstructing language and like the symbolism of language, like just in the way that Charlie was performing these, lyrics that always get stuck in our heads, like from famous pop songs, and like the meaning behind it, I think that's why like performance is such a valuable tool. I see it also in the same line as biohacking, actually, because it's hacking that symbolic meaning, it's hacking discourse, rhetoric. So it really fit with this discussion.
The interruptions and the kind of almost like glitchy and kind of repetition.
Right. Like
this kind of possession by these kind of syncopated rhythms of language, and.
Yeah, because I feel like we're all just caught in this simulation of, you know, capitalist aesthetics, heteronormativity.
We can't use simulation.
Yeah, we're in the simulation. Yeah, we can't use simulation, but yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you too, right?
Fantastic, thank you. That was easy.
Thank you so much. I will invite all you tomorrow, starting at 10. We have for the people that have already booked, the workshop with Mary Maggic. Otherwise, the other talk starts at 3 in the afternoon. So follow our program online. Thank you. Right. And obviously, following the program online, this means that tomorrow after the 2 talk, there will be the performance by Zander Porter and the closing event of Opening the Pill. Thank you.